David Croft was making this ridiculous sweet shop analogy. I don't know if you caught it.
No, I don't think it did.
So he's going,
Right, so picture this, Martin. You're in a sweet shop and you're having all the chocolates that you want. Um, and then Bernie Collins comes along and she gets lots of chocolates. That's super clipping.
and I'm thinking, what do you mean by that?
What?
It's something to do with battery. He was trying to turn it into a sweet shop. Hello and welcome back to episode 2 of 102.9 SLICKS FM. Once again, I am your host, Lewis, joined by Dave, the Racing Line app. Ellis, Dave, how are we?
I'm good. I'm tired. It's 1 p.m. we're recording this, but that means we've both been up since about 3 a.m. for the Australian Grand Prix, so getting tired. Need a nap.
But
I'm old.
It's we weren't up for no reason. We were up for the Australian Grand Prix, and we're not going to do some reaction-based podcast where we talk it through bit by bit. We're going to reflect on what we talked about last week and sort of see if our predictions were accurate, if it was the shit show we thought it might be or might not be, and just, talk about the Grand Prix as a whole and see how we felt. So going into the weekend, what were your impressions? Before we spoke, there wasn't any track action. So after seeing practice, quali, and now the race, what were your initial thoughts on a Friday?
It's been a bit of a roller coaster of emotions through this weekend, hasn't it? And I think when we recorded, I said I was cautiously optimistic about how these cars would be. And I think Friday was a bit rough, wasn't it? There was a lot of discovery from everybody, from the teams, from the drivers, from the journalists, from the fans. Everybody was on a bit of a discovery. Fans are obviously the loudest in that they have very big opinions at all times. But I was optimistic going in, and then by Friday, I was a bit worried. I was like,
Yes.
I'm not sure how this is going to go. And to be fair, I don't think even Formula One knew how it was going to go.
No, I had a similar thing. I didn't wake up for practice on Friday, but I watched it in the morning, and within 3 minutes, there were 2 breakdowns. And I thought, if this is, setting the stall out for what we're going to have, it's obviously going to get better. But it was Friday and Saturday for me were not a good look. It was sloppy, cars just falling to bits. We'll get into the ins and outs of it, but it's been quite a mixed bag. And I was going in thinking this is pretty disastrous in terms of new regs, and the race is going to be an absolute nightmare. And you even had commentators saying they predict there'll be maybe 10 finishers and that everybody who finishes the race will probably get points, which is just such a wild thing to say about your sport and how little faith that there is in these regulations and things like that. So it was really looking quite bleak. However, saying that, post-race, it's kind of redeemed itself slightly. I thought the race was actually okay. What do you think?
I'd agree with that. I think reliability isn't a problem in my head. But I grew up in the 80s and 90s when there was quite a few races where only 6 to 10 cars finished, and sometimes less. There was some races where full points weren't even awarded right down to 6th place because there wasn't enough cars to actually complete the race distance. So reliability, that doesn't bother me too much. And in a way, it kind of adds another variable to things. I kind of like it when reliability is an additional variable that what the teams have got to play with. So reliability, I wasn't too worried about. And even seeing it in free practice, I was like, okay, it's a bit rough, but it's fine. Qualifying was when I started seeing alarm bells, because that's when we did get into the super clipping stuff. And I'm like, oh, this just isn't fun. Like
We've all
watching
seen the
cars.
clips. We've all heard the onboards, and it's been broken down, and we're losing, 30, 40 mile an hour.
Yeah.
Before that chicane at the top end of the circuit. That's not what we want to be seeing.
No.
And the lap times reflect that. The cars are slower. And I know we said that slow doesn't mean bad, but it's hard to see a car at full throttle losing speed in such a significant way and still being, excited and saying it's the pinnacle of motorsport and things like that. So it's a tricky one. And it's all the battery management and, things like that, which is quite hard to see as a viewer on TV when battery's being deployed and when it isn't, the boost mode and things like that. Because as we saw, there was a nice little scrap between Leclerc and Russell that went on for a few laps, and Hamilton was in the mix and things like that. but it was probably a case of one driver saving the battery and then the other one using it and then flip the script. But we just didn't really know. Whereas DRS is a visual thing that within a second you can see it open, but now everyone has the active aero. It's a little bit harder to follow and sort of predict where a move will be made.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think in the race, they did introduce the battery graphics when you were on board. You could see when it was discharging and recharging, and that was quite useful. But when you've got a pack of cars, I understand that it's quite hard to bring up graphics for each car to show which car is doing what without filling the screen with just stuff. I think already the onboard graphics are a little bit busy with the way they covered the halo and things like that.
They've got the active aero icon as well. Where
Yeah,
the little lines that open it. Also, I don't like that you said discharge. I'm just putting that out there.
are we not using that word?
Didn't enjoy that. But
Okay.
it probably is the right word, but discharge.
Yeah, okay. I'll think of another word for a minute. Deploy.
Deplete.
There we go.
I don't deploy. Yeah.
But I think it's a weekend of two halves, and I think the most important thing to take away for me is that the racing was a lot better than qualifying. And that's
Agreed.
probably the correct way round for this to have shaken out. Qualifying, to me, should be a car that is being pushed to its limit completely on the edge because it only needs to achieve one lap. But these cars cannot actually achieve one lap without some sort of energy conservation. So qualifying looked really poor and really flat. Didn't enjoy that. In the race, we did see a bit of LMP1 style from a decade ago racing where cars were passing and repassing and boosting at different points. The first, I think it was 15 laps or so, were incredibly exciting. Great passing. And even after Ferrari made their now traditional strategy mess and everybody got separated, there was still great racing down the field. And you go, well, okay, does that make it too easy to pass? Well, Max Verstappen didn't find it that easy to pass. He did make his way up to the back of Lando, but he wasn't able to pass Lando. And although it looks like he passed a lot of cars on track, the reality is he kind of didn't because a lot of them fell off and a lot of it was done in pit stops. So passing wasn't actually that easy despite the multiple car wheel-to-wheel battle that we had for the lead. We had a three-way battle for the lead at one point. And I think that's the best way for this to have played out because Saturday was worrying and Sunday was, in my opinion, a pretty great race. Dulled down a little bit, but you can't have wheel-to-wheel action every single lap because then it actually gets a bit boring because it's kind of meaningless at that point. So I
That's
think it
true.
played out really, really well. I think I'm back to being cautiously optimistic after a worrying Friday and Saturday. I'm more optimistic about the regulations. I'm more optimistic about other circuits because this circuit's not actually that great for regen either, and they still managed it. So that's fine. I'm more optimistic about the gaps between the cars. I know the field was a lot more spread out than it has been in the last couple of years, but the gaps between the teams themselves are not that big, especially between Mercedes and McLaren. Mercedes and Ferrari. I'm just so used to saying McLaren at the front. So I'm happy with how that went to the point where I'm going to check the Chinese Grand Prix schedule and be like, should I get up for that one as well?
Oh,
Because
he's
that
waking
was
up now.
well, I did say in the last pod that I don't think I tended to wake up for a Chinese Grand Prix, and certainly not a sprint race. But I think China's a sprint weekend, and
Tis
I think
that
it's
back straight
next
with this
weekend.
energy model is going to be really interesting.
I think it's going to be really interesting. Yeah, like overall, the circuit itself is better for regen than Albert Park is because there are more stops. But you've got that super long back straight, which at the time it was built, I think was the longest in Formula One. The clipping on that is going to be quite extreme. Again, I'm not hopeful for qualifying, but it is what it is. But it's a sprint weekend. So we've actually got two races. So that might be really, really interesting. So yeah, I'm optimistic again. I'm really happy with how that race went in terms of the future of the sport or the immediate future of the sport with the regulations and how the teams are balanced and things. I'm quite happy with that.
Well, let's talk about Saturday because I have some notes of what did and didn't go particularly well and what sort of got me a bit worried for the race. So first of all, Verstappen's crash.
Yeah.
That was really unusual. And then was it Albon or Sainz about at the same corner in pretty much the same way, but it was the front axle that locked instead of the rear. Quite unusual. And what it's done is Judge and Kimi are both saying, we like these engines. You heard George on the radio. Of course they do, because they won.
Yeah.
Further down the pack you go, it's clear that there's not much happiness with this setup. I mean, Isaac Hadjar looked fuming in the post-qualifying interview, really unhappy. And then in his post-race debrief, he basically said there's too many things to name that are wrong with the car. And then obviously Max is saying the same thing. So is it a Red Bull issue, even though it looks quite fast over one lap? But then the Racing Bulls are up there.
There was two other kind of almost incidents that happened where Lando ran over a fan that was attached to George's car not George's car, Kimmy's car,
Kimmy's.
when Kimmy's car left
Yes,
the pit lane. He
that
ran
was
over
one
the
of my
fan,
notes.
and then
Yes.
he said that he didn't see it because he's looking at the steering wheel because he had so much to do on the car. And you
Mhm.
go, well, that's a valid point, but you're spending a lot of time managing a computer here, so you need to look at a screen. But Lewis had an almost incident, I think, with Hadjar on the pitch straight where Hadjar was slow and Lewis was looking at the steering wheel doing stuff and then looked up and suddenly there was a Hadjar there. And Hadjar was actually doing the right thing because in the race director's notes, they'd said if you have an issue on the pit straight, keep left because it's easier to recover a car. And Hadjar was in the middle of
I
potentially
did think
having
that was
an
strange.
incident. Yeah.
I think it was an Alpine,
Oh, you're right.
and
Yes, it was.
it was pretty much on,
Colapinto, you're right.
on the racing line.
So he was doing what he was told, which in hindsight, you'd be like, okay, maybe that's not smart, but they were talking about like access gaps to recover cars and stuff like that. So Colapinto did what he was told, but in any
Yeah.
other
See, I
previous
didn't
set
know
of
about those
regulations.
notes. I did think, why on earth is he not over on the pit wall side?
But it's one of those ones where you've got a bunch of things on one side where you've got somebody thinking about the safety of recovering a car, but on the other side, you've got drivers now looking at the road less than they were. And those two things don't really mix. So maybe there needs to be something done there. Maybe the system needs to be more automated, something like that. That's a route that LMP1 has gone down when it changed to
You could
hypercar.
argue it will get easier and they'll get used to
Yeah.
it. And it's a bit like when you have a new car and you don't know where any of the controls are. So,
Yeah.
but then once you're used to it, you can adjust everything pretty much without looking. So there could be that in it, but it's happened a couple times now. And then, I mean, there was Colapinto and Lawson nearly had a big crash at the race start. That was unrelated to the wheel controls. That was just a battery deployment issue, which we kind of saw up and down the grid from a lot of cars. The Ferraris were absolute shit off a shovel, but
Yeah.
the Mercs, I think Norris didn't have a great start. And then obviously Lawson basically bogged down and just had no battery. It's seemingly very hard to manage and prepare and get everything ready. I missed the actual start by about 20 seconds. Is there a blue light now where they rev the bollocks off it and then
The-
the 5 lights
does a-
come on?
Does appear to be. I was in the middle of changing commentary streams at that point because I'm using F1 TV through a VPN, so I was switching between Sky and F1 TV. I mean, they were explaining the blue lights, but it does appear to be a blue light comes on, and that is prepare for the start. So that's when turbos are getting spooled up, and
Yeah.
then the start procedure begins. As noted by Charles Leclerc, the start procedure was quite short this time. And he said,
That's probably why I missed it.
well, it was like almost like
Ah.
1 second. Lights came on and immediately went off. But I thought that was a randomized thing. But Charles said it's whoever has the button control does it. But I'll need to check up
Right.
on that because I thought it was a randomized computer thing. But maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I know there's a person starting the lights. I wasn't aware they had control of when they went out or not.
Yeah. So I thought it was a human start the lights and then the lights going off are
Mm.
randomized. But I'm prepared to be wrong. If somebody knows, then write in. We're on Instagram.
No, you're not wrong. You're right. No one comment because we're right.
Right. Okay. We're just going to go with that. We're always right.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
is how I've been for most of my life. So it's fine.
To be fair, I'm yet to be wrong actually. So it's a good streak. So we'll keep
I was
that up.
almost wrong at one point. I thought I was, but it turned out
That's
I was right. It
frightening.
was fine.
Yeah, could not be me.
The start procedure was really short, and whether that played into Ferrari's hands or not, I don't know. We're going to find out in China, presumably we get a longer start procedure. We ended up with Charles first by turn one, which is crazy because he started fourth on the grid, which is again,
He was a
we're back to
rocket ship.
almost 90s style starts where it's actually quite difficult to get a car off the line because they have more power than they do traction.
His
which is-
onboard is
it's fantastic, isn't it? It's
fabulous.
like an
just
absolute rocket
weaving.
ship.
Yeah. So I missed the start by about 20 seconds and I was scrambling, just trying to get my bearings of what the hell's going on. Because I load it up and we're at about turn 3 turn 4. And you've got Charles in the lead. You've got Lindblad fourth. It says Piastri and Hulkenberg are out, and Lawson's way down because he basically struggled to get off the line. So I didn't have a clue what had gone on. So it took me a while to get familiar with what had gone on, watch a few replays. I mean, Oscar Piastri.
Oh,
What do we say? What do we say about that?
I was so confused because I turned on the TV around about 3:30 in the morning, so half an hour till green flag, and Alex Brundle was doing replays of a Piastri crash, and I was like, did he crash in free practice 3? And I just didn't see it, and we're recapping the weekend. I don't understand. And then very quickly you realise, I was like, oh no, he's dropped it on the way to the grid. I was like, oh
That's
no, your
horrific.
home Grand Prix, first race of the year.
That's
So,
worse than Hadjar last year. At least Hadjar made it to the grid.
yeah, and
Ish.
then he did it in wet as well,
Mm.
whereas Piastri was in dry conditions. So apparently he used a little bit too much throttle, but he also had more power than he expected because of the way that the battery was set up at that point, which I believe is what happened to Colapinto in Bahrain when they were doing practice starts, and he had a kind of weird half spin.
Yes,
He
he
had the
did.
same thing where his throttle trace shows that he did the same thing each time, and then one time he had more power and he kind of had a half spin. So it does appear that in random points, especially when you're not racing, that appears to be is a really big problem. When they're racing, it appears to be in some sort of mode that it's actually quite predictable. All these other times, like preparing for the grid and things like that, where the car's in a strange non-racy mode, it does odd things. And Mercedes said something kind of similar with their cars, because one of the reasons they said that they had a bad start was they had no electrical power off the start because both the batteries were depleted. And you're like, well, how did that happen? Did you not just spend a lap trying to get them prepared for the start? But apparently they weren't in the right condition. So a lot of the stuff that we've seen, it appears to be that the teams haven't quite worked out the procedure on how to get the car to the grid and fully set up for a race, apart from Ferrari, who have worked that out very, very well, as we saw.
At least they have one thing worked out. Now they can work on strategy. And I
Yeah,
think
but
it will all improve. I mean, Lando himself said he was slow at the start and then figured out the car as he was going and picked back up again towards the end. So, I mean, only 6 cars finished on the race winner's lap. Only 6 cars did 58 laps, which is
I'm all
not
right with that.
really.
Yeah, again, we're going back to 90s and 2000s where you go, well, no, this is fine. I'm going to Google like F1 2000, and we'll just pick a random race from Wikipedia because I don't know any of these. And we'll just see how many people finished on the lead lap, because this is kind of back to
This is live analysis, everybody.
yeah, European Grand Prix, which was apparently at the Nürburgring. And the results, where are they? Scroll down. Oh, wow. Okay, this is a hell of a one. Only 2 cars finished on the lead lap.
2.
2. Michael Schumacher beat Mika Hakkinen by 13 seconds. David Coulthard was third, down to 6th, was 1 lap. Everybody else was 2 laps. Only 9 cars finished the race. So, like, that's the
Okay,
era that I
you've made
grew
your
up
point.
in. Like, I'll pick another one because that's not good. I'll pick Hungary just for an example. Hungary, 6 cars were on the lead lap. So, like, that's the era that I grew up in, where it's quite normal to have these gaps. And as we're saying in the previous podcast, it's like, I think that might be a good thing for racing overall, because if everybody's only half a tenth faster than each other, it's quite difficult to overtake because you don't have a significant speed advantage over the car in front. So I'm okay with that. I don't see it as like unprofessional or anything. It's like, this is top tier motorsport. It's really, really, really hard for teams as well. So if you think about it, you're only losing 80 seconds over an hour and a half. So you're losing,
Yeah,
a
when you
second
break it
per
down.
minute. I'm all right with that.
Okay, that's fair. I think one of the commentators made a joke that Sergio Perez had forgotten what blue flags meant. I think at one point he held
He
up,
was penalised,
was
yeah.
it Leclerc or one of the Mercedes? I can't remember exactly, but there was probably a lot of blue flags, but also a lot of overtakes. I think triple the amount of overtakes from last year, which we all like to see. So no complaints on that side of things. So let's talk briefly about Aston Martin, the carpal tunnel team.
So there was a rumour that the nerve damage that has been talked about was actually them deflecting, and it's not a real thing. Because if they frame it as a safety issue and it's drivers' health and safety, they will get to bring more safety-related upgrades. When in reality, this is actually just the engine is junk. Now, Who knows at this point? Like, I don't
Lovely
think
bit of
anybody.
semantics there. I enjoy
Yeah,
that.
because you're allowed to bring more safety upgrades than you
Yeah.
are anything else. So is it a safety issue? It might be, but what actually happened? Well, Alonso actually did decently well at one point. He was up in ninth, I think, maybe 10th at one point,
Mm.
and appeared to be holding his own. And then he had a mechanical issue that stopped the car. They did whatever they needed to, and then they sent him back out again. So, like, oh, cool. We're actually just doing testing now. Like, he's just
Yeah.
out there testing. And eventually the car did break down. You're like, cool. But I think Lance managed something like 40 odd laps, didn't he?
He was not classified and he was 15 laps down, but he was just circulating, getting data. I mean, Fernando said, we never even got to 7 p.m. in Bahrain. We never got to do a race start. So to actually get that data is important and doesn't see it as an absolute disaster. So that's good.
It's funny that this is classed as not an absolute disaster, though, because in any other world, this is an absolute disaster.
It's a huge disaster. Yeah.
But he's also right in that in the context, this is not a disaster. This is good. They achieved more laps than what they said they were going to do at the start of the weekend, because it was not going to be like potentially don't even qualify or potentially do 5 laps and park it. And I
Lance
think
did
between
43 and Fernando did 21.
so between the two of them, the car actually covered a race distance then. So that's really good then, because that's really, really useful, because they've not had that level of data before, which is not ideal, but it's better than where we expected they were going to be, given the comments they were making on Friday. Whether or not they can build on that quickly or not, who knows? Because this really does depend on what Honda can do. And it sounds like Honda are even further behind than what we all feared.
Yes.
So is it a good weekend or a bad weekend? Who knows at this point? It was a weekend.
It was a weekend.
It was bad, but not as bad as expected, I think.
Yeah. And so with you saying you're okay with there only being 6 cars finishing on the final lap, how do you feel about the spread of lap times on qualifying? Because last year, 2 seconds covered the whole grid.
Mhm.
This year, 2 seconds covers the top 8, 9.
I'm okay with that again, but I think that's going to condense really quickly as teams work out how to optimize the power usage over a single lap. Because optimizing power usage over a single lap is going to be a lot easier than trying to work out when to use the power when you're in a pack of cars, for example. So it seems quite spread out at the moment. I think come mid-season, that gap is going to be down to 3 seconds across the whole grid, maybe except for Cadillac, but they just need to be there.
Valtteri was 106.0%. So he was flirting with the 107%.
Yep.
So
that is pretty close, isn't it?
That is very close.
I think if you can stay within 107%, that's fine. That's all they need to do for Cadillac at the moment. Everybody else, I think, is going to condense up really, really quickly. And we did see in qualifying as well that the Aston isn't as slow as feared, because we all thought it would not only brake more, but it would be slower than the Cadillac. It turns out it's not. It's faster than the Cadillac, even in its current broken state. So pretty good from both those teams, I think, given the circumstances.
I'm impressed with the Audi.
As an Audi fanboy, I'm very, very happy about this.
The singular Audi, not both, because we didn't really get to see Nico, but Gabby is, I mean, he's exactly where you'd expect the Sauber of last year to be, sort of the bottom end of the points. But for a first time out with their own powertrain, I'm quite impressed.
I think the thing to look at it though is, like, I am impressed that they got points, but they are behind a Racing Bull and a Haas.
True.
You're like, the Audi factory team should probably be ahead of a Racing Bull and a Haas. But not only
he almost was, he was very close to Lindblad at the end.
He was, but
maybe a lap
should
or
have
two
been
more
ahead. And realistically, if Lawson hadn't fluffed the start, there's a chance that it would have been both Racing Bulls ahead. There was a time that Ocon and Gasly were ahead as well. So it's great that they caught points. I'm really happy about that. I'm really happy Bortoletto got points as well. He's going to be a superstar. He's great. I'm just worried that mid-pack is a lot closer than what Audi expected. And they've ended up being like, oh, well, we beat Alpine and Williams, but we kind of lost to everybody else in the mid-pack. There was a lot of cars missing above them that elevated them into that 9th place. So great result, but I'm kind of cautious on that one. I'm a bit worried that that's not a true reflection of their pace.
Yeah. And I do think overall, the race kind of saved face a little bit for what people were worried about. Even, as I said, the commentators were saying they expect no more than 10, 12 cars to finish, and we had 16 finish. What I will say, I don't know which commentary you were listening to. Did you listen to the international feed?
I flicked between both. I had Sky for the first half and F1
Oh,
TV for the second
yeah, I'm
half.
sorry to hear that. Because the whole race, David Croft was making this ridiculous sweet shop analogy. I don't know if you caught it.
No, I don't think I did.
So he's going, right, so picture this, Martin. You're in a sweet shop and you're having all the chocolates that you want. Um, and then Bernie Collins comes along and she gets lots of chocolates. That's super clipping. And I'm thinking, what do you mean by that?
What?
It's something to do with battery. He was trying to turn it into a sweet shop. And he was basically saying, they're all going for their own little sweeties. And I thought this really isn't working. And I, on many occasions, have deeply considered getting a VPN so I don't have to listen to them.
I didn't hear that one, but I did hear him try to explain the running out of power being super clipping. And I think I'm being too pedantic about it, or maybe the commentator should be more pedantic about it. He was like, when you run out of power, that's super clipping. I was like, well, kinda, it's clipping is what it is, but it's happening so bad that it's been kind of nicknamed super clipping. So like it's there's situations where the running out of power is not creating that, like turn 11, for example. You weren't getting the clipping quite as bad. It was a run down to turn 9. So I know I'd actually like them to be a bit more pedantic when it comes to the technical side, because it's so hard to understand that they should start being like explaining it properly. But I did not hear the sweet shop one,
Well,
thankfully.
yeah. Just remember, when they run out of batteries, it's like running out of sweets in a sweet shop, apparently.
I did have a weird moment post-race where Alex Brundle was explaining something, but I was in the kitchen making a coffee, so I can hear Alex Brundle's voice. But he's so close to Martin Brundle that I assumed it was Martin Brundle explaining something. And I walked through and I was like, oh, it's Alex. It's odd because when you look at them, you can hear the distinction in their voice, but you can't see who's saying it. The distinction becomes a lot closer. If that makes sense. So I thought
It
I was
does.
listening to Martin when I was listening to Alex. Then I had that thought of, oh yeah, they're on kind of opposite commentator teams, aren't they? So yeah,
Yes, you can't really escape the Brundles, really. If you wanted to, you've had it. But yeah, sweet shops. So just remember the sweeties, and Bernie Collins is coming for your sweeties, apparently.
well, I don't have any sweeties because I'm on a diet. And it's also because I ate them all, but that's a different point.
Speaking of diet, we'll touch on Williams slightly. The the beefy little Williams that's apparently carrying a few extra kilos than they want. They've had a few too many fish suppers, nearly in the points, but also Carlos saying quite dramatically over the radio that I can't keep driving like this. It was a bit Titanic.
It was a bit, wasn't it? And whilst Albon was nearly in the points, let's be honest, he was also nearly not in the points. There's a lot of
Yeah.
cars that should have been ahead of him.
Yeah.
And that nearly in the points is quite an optimistic way of looking at how Williams' race played out.
Yes. So it's a shame, that we thought, well, we maybe didn't think, because they didn't attend testing straight away, did they? That who would you say is the best of the rest based on Australia?
I would put Racing Bulls as best of the rest. I think had Lawson had a better start, we would have seen both of them in the points. And I think that car is the fastest of outside of the top 4. I think Lindblad's going to get the most out of it over a year. Like, yes, he lost out to Behrman, but Behrman's got a year under his belt at this point. So I'm putting the Racing Bulls 5th fastest, with maybe Haas or Audi 6th. It's difficult to know because we obviously lost an Audi at the start. So that one's a bit harder. The Racing Bulls car looks pretty sorted, doesn't it?
We kind of only had Haas with 2 competitors that were sort of up the sharp end in the midfield, because Liam was down the order, Nico didn't start, and Colapinto is Colapinto. So yeah, it's looking, I'd say, Haas or Racing Bulls.
I think the more surprising thing about the running order was I expected it to be a larger gap between first and second, or rather between Mercedes and whoever was second. But I expected second, third, and fourth to be close, and we don't
Do
appear
you mean
to have
constructor
that.
or driver? Do you mean between Russell and Kimi
Constructors.
or
So I
constructor?
expected the 2 Mercedes to be really far ahead, and then I expected the next group of 6 cars to be really close. But what we appear to have ended up with is Mercedes have got an edge, but not by that much. It's not that far
Yeah.
ahead. It was 15 seconds to Charles at the end, but there was also a bad pit stop strategy in there twice.
The Ferrari looks like a good race car
And a good starter, yeah.
and a great starter. So,
There was an interesting point made on F1 TV, I think by Alex Brundle, who said that passing is not as easy as it seems at times. So you could end up with a situation where a Ferrari launch puts it into the lead, and then it's actually difficult to pass depending on the race. So those starts are not to be underestimated.
especially somewhere like Monaco.
Yeah. And the other thing that surprised me, and I'm quite happy about this, was Lewis and Charles are basically together. At
They
the
are.
end, Lewis was catching, and you could say Charles had eased off a little bit, but I don't think he had because they kept telling Lewis to push. So it stands to reason they were telling Charles the same thing. Lewis seems a lot happier, and there was a lot more cohesion with him and his temporary race engineer on the radio as well. And it's like, well, that's quite nice. Not once did we hear "we are checking." Not once did we hear a ridiculous radio call from Ferrari.
They maybe should have pitted one of them under the first VSC.
Oh yeah,
maybe.
made the wrong call. They definitely made the wrong call, but there was no point where a radio call was made where you just go, that's just stupidity.
No,
'Cause
I
you got
think
that a lot
Antonelli would have got them
previously.
back anyway, whether they did or didn't. Which
I think so,
I'm
yeah.
surprised. And this is more a compliment to Kimi than anything. How close he is to George. I expected George to absolutely wipe the floor with him, but Kimi kept him pretty keen.
And
You
he
know,
had to
to
recover.
finish 3
'cause
seconds behind George is pretty impressive.
It's pretty impressive if they just had both clean races, but Kimi had to recover in qualifying after stacking it in FP3. So car got rebuilt.
And then a shoddy race start.
Qualified well after what was going to be a very rough qualifying, had a terrible race start, and then came back, finished second, 3 seconds off. I'm going to make a wild statement here. George needs to win the championship this year because Kimi's coming for him.
Kimi's going to win races this year. It's inevitable, isn't it?
Kimi in his second year is, I would say, almost outperformed George in that race because of how much he had to recover to get within 3 seconds of George. Like George obviously did better, and one of the reasons that Kimi had to recover was he stacked it in FP3s. You know,
But that lap time he put in when it mattered was exceptional.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the cooling fans being a fine and not a penalty? Do you agree with that?
No, I think that one should have been a penalty, given that you took equipment onto the circuit, deposited it on the circuit, and left it. If a driver's wheel isn't attached correctly and they leave the pit lane and it comes off, there's whole penalties involved in that for obvious reasons, especially with wheels bouncing around being incredibly dangerous. I think when you send a car out in a dangerous condition, it should be more than a fine. I kind of understand why, because the teams are all still trying to work out procedures with these new cars. They just rebuilt the car. We know why it happened. It's
But a
excusable
fan is
why
a
it
fan.
happened. Yeah, and it
The
not
fan
only
isn't
did
new, you know.
yeah, and did too as well, both sides. So like the whole procedure was missed there. I think that should have been more of a penalty, but I understand why it wasn't, because there was a lot going on for the teams to learn and a lot going on for Mercedes rebuilding that car. So
It feels like they were given the benefit of the doubt slightly. And I
it
think
does a little bit.
if they were maybe both deposited in gravel, the fine makes sense. But one being on the racing line and then being hit by Norris, that's a car being released in an unsafe condition, as they say.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It was going to cause a red flag because it was on the racing line. So whether somebody hit it or not, you've caused a red flag through sending a car out in dangerous conditions. So yeah, I would have given them more for that. I don't think it would have changed the race result ultimately. I think Kimi was good enough that he would have recovered to second because, like you said, even if Ferrari had gotten the pit strategy right, I think Mercedes had enough to beat them. It would have been a lot closer, and they would have had to work for it more. It might have made it more interesting in terms of tyres because they were talking about 2 stops at one point, and then George said, no, if we keep at this pace, we can 1 stop it. But you wouldn't have been able to keep at that pace had Ferrari been nibbling at their heels. So that might have changed the race quite dramatically had Ferrari been on top of the strategy. But for Ferrari to be on top of his strategy, it means reversing 10 years of, habits. So yeah, there was the potential for an even more interesting race there, which gives me hope for the rest of the season as well.
How do you feel about Max Verstappen's performance?
I think that's almost as much as he could have done. I don't think it is as good as a performance as what the numbers say, because it said something like where did he start exactly? Let me have a
Started
quick look.
20th.
Started 20th and
because
finished
19
sixth.
drivers set a lap time.
Yeah.
Carlos and Lance didn't set a time, and then Max binned it.
So on the numbers, it looks like he passed 14 cars, but that's not really what happened because you immediately lost Piastri and Hulkenberg. Hadjar's engine blew up. Two of those are Cadillacs that wouldn't have counted. Two of those are Aston Martins that wouldn't. Like, the numbers come down quite dramatically, and a bunch were made in the pit stops as well. I don't think the Red Bull is actually that well sorted. I think Hadjar was doing incredibly well, and I think Max did all he could have. I think if he had started higher, he probably would have finished ahead of Lando, but way off the back of the Ferraris.
Yeah.
I think that Red Bull is sitting in comfortably third place with Mercedes and Ferrari well ahead and McLaren well behind. So, or maybe Max just isn't that interested. He's been pretty scathing about these cars. So,
Well, it
who
seems the
cares
Red
to
Bull
Max?
boys are driving in anger because Isaac's fuming. Max is vocally quite unhappy with the direction that F1's taken. So it does give that. I mean, you heard his comment after he binned it in qualifying. Oh, the rear axle locked up, fantastic.
I think
he's kind of done with it before it's even really begun.
if I was Isaac Hadjar, I'd change the framing and the context of everything because he does appear to be driving a bit angry, but he's also appears to be the closest teammate that Max Verstappen's had in a long time, which raises his stock. Now, we talked at the start of George Russell appears to be the only driver who's happy with these cars because he's winning and he's looking confident for a world championship even by this point. Isaac Hadjar should be in the same boat of if this is the way it's going to play out, he's almost on a Max Verstappen level. Now, you could frame that as Max isn't actually that interested in it, his standard is lower. You could look at it that way, but that doesn't actually matter. If you've got a driver who is either with or very close to Max Verstappen, it raises their level a little bit, and I think that's where Hadjar is kind of sitting. So whilst he might be a bit angry about how to drive them, he's looked like a superstar in that race before the engine grenaded itself. And again, a very 90s fashion. It was kind of old school. It was nice to see a good old-fashioned mechanical failure.
Yeah, and the noise was bloody godly, wasn't it?
Oh, it was great.
Yeah.
Just needed more white smoke coming out of it as
Just
over the black.
absolutely shat its guts out.
It did. And I think had that not happened, you would have ended up with Hadjar comfortably ahead of Lando and sitting in the fifth place.
He was probably fifth.
Yeah. But the big thing that I take away from this race, other than the regulations, look how well the majority of the rookies or drivers that are still in their second year of F1 did. You had Behrman in seventh, absolutely brilliant. You had Antonelli in second, absolutely brilliant. Lindblad eighth. What a performance from Lindblad. That is brilliant. Bortoleto, ninth, absolutely brilliant. Fortunately, Jar had the engine failures, doesn't count, but he was up in comfortable, third place, fourth place when the engine failed, something like that. But that's brilliant. There's a whole bunch of drivers there that you go, they are not only doing well, they're outperforming the midfield of the current F1 grid.
It
And
does
that's
feel
brilliant.
like a bit of a changing of the guard is happening, doesn't it?
It does. And then you look at them and you just be like, well, there's future world champions in there. But not all of
100%.
them are going to get a world champion because that's just not how F1 works. And you're like, is Antonelli? Probably. Behrman? Maybe. Lindblad? Maybe. Bortoleto? Very much depends on Audi. Hadjar? Oh, maybe. There's a lot of really strong performances in there, and it's really good for the future of F1 because for a long time we had a lot of drivers taking up seats for 5, 6, 7 years who were never going to go anywhere. Like, they weren't bad drivers, it's just they were never going to go anywhere. And now we've shuffled quite a lot in and out, and the grid is looking really fresh and exciting.
It feels a bit like 2019 where George and Lando and Alex joined, and obviously Lando's now a champion. And George is probably set to be, who we're seeing now sort of pick up a few race wins and podiums and things like that. Antonelli and Bortoleto, for me, are future champions. I think there's going to be multiple race winners throughout, but there are clearly some that are a step above the rest in terms of the newer batch of drivers.
I think so. I think there's a lot of drivers need to be slightly worried about their future now. I think we talked about this a little bit at one point last year where 2025 might have been Lando's only chance to get a championship because the rules change, you don't know what's going to happen. And it looks like right now that Lando championship might be a one-off as far as 2026 is concerned. And we said that with Oscar as well. It's like, well, he needs to do it because who knows when he'll get a chance again. But not only in terms of teams, but now in terms of drivers, because you've got drivers who haven't had world championships yet. Russell, Leclerc, Piastri, they're your big three. They don't have championships yet. Are they all going to get championships before people like Behrman, Lindblad, Bortoletto, and Antonelli are up to speed?
Probably
I don't
not.
think so. I think you're
No.
going to see one of these rookies or second-year rookies get a title before people like Piastri and maybe even Leclerc, to the demise of or despair of a lot of his fans.
No, I agree. I see Behrman replacing Hamilton,
Yep.
and like how long of a career do you have with Ferrari if you're Charles before moving somewhere else? But at this point, it's really hard to say he's too old because he's my age. But
He's not too old, but
when you have 10-year younger drivers, you know that they have sell-by dates unless you're called Fernando Alonso.
yep. And I think this might be Lewis's last year in F1, unless the car gets really good towards the end and then he gives it another go, because you might get a title in a red car, which would be amazing for him, but I don't think it'll happen. And I think you're right. I think Behrman goes in there. I think Lindblad goes into Red Bull when Max Verstappen leaves, because these regulations are not going to change. Max doesn't seem like the kind of guy who has hissy fits over absolutely nothing like that. I think if he's not enjoying it, he will just go.
Yeah.
So you end up with
He's done
Lindblad
what
and
he's
Hadjar.
proven.
Yeah.
From what he needed to do. He's one of the greatest of all time already. He's won everything he needs to win. He's not bothered about chasing titles and being the statistical best. He will go elsewhere. I don't believe when people say that he will obviously enjoy winning, but only if he enjoys the driving that leads to the win.
Yeah. Yeah.
He wouldn't want to be an Formula E champion, even
No.
if he could, because the cars just wouldn't do anything for him.
Yeah, which is why you see him driving various GT3 cars and testing over the winter, so that he can find out what he enjoys driving the most, and then he'll go and race whatever he wants, which is, great. It's like he's a proper racing driver. He's probably one of the few drivers who could go and get a triple crown if he really wanted to. I don't think he's that interested in that. I don't think he's interested in achievements in that way. I think
he's
he's just
got a young
interested
family
in,
now.
he does, and you've got to question whether going to IndyCar is a great idea if you're in a young family with the Indy 500 and how dangerous it is, but who knows? Maybe he'll do it. But I think when you look at the current 2026 grid and the Australian Grand Prix results, it puts the future of F1 in quite a nice place when it comes to driving talent. There's 4 or 5 drivers in there that you can look at and be like, they could be future world champions. And that's before you even start including the Piastris and the Leclercs of the world as well. Who,
Or repeat champions like Norris.
yeah, exactly. It's like, if,
Norris isn't completely ruled out of winning again.
no, he's not at all. And of course, if McLaren do return to form, you've still got Lando has to be Oscar, but Oscar has to be Lando, and we're back to last year. And as we've seen, it's like, well, it could actually go either way with them. It's like it could do, but there's so many good drivers in there, and the way the grid is set at the moment, I'd be slightly worried if I was Oscar Piastri, of all people.
Yeah.
I'd be sitting there looking at, how do I do this? Charles, I'd be worried as well, but he just finished third, which is best of the non-Mercedes. There's hope there, but there's so many drivers I think have just come in and are going to leapfrog the upper midfield and the drivers who we would have before called them title contenders. I think give it 2-3 years, you're going to end up with, we're talking about Behrman and Lindblad in this situation rather than just Russell and Antonelli.
Absolutely. And the thing is, we have what appears to be quite an attritional season, or a turning point, really. You've got this fresh talent coming up, and I could see Lewis, Fernando, and Max leave at the end of this year, which would mean that Lando and whoever's champion this year are the only champions on the grid. So it really is the end of a certain era in that sense.
Not only could you see those 3 leaving, obviously the idea is that Cadillac are going to put Colton Herta in a car. That's one of the goals of that team. So you could end up needing to replace 3, 4, maybe even 5 drivers. Does Liam Lawson survive if this performance continues? Does Colapinto survive? Does Ocon survive? Because Behrman continually beating Ocon, you've kind of got to go, well, what's the point in him having this seat at that point? If you're getting beat by the much younger teammate who's eventually going to be at Ferrari.
Ayo Komatsu has basically said publicly that Esteban Ocon needs to sort of get a move on.
I'm in 2 minds about whether your team manager should be saying those things publicly, but I agree with the sentiment. And I'm not normally one who'll be like, well, second driver has to improve because the first driver's beating him. But Ocon should be beating Behrman. Like, it's
Mm.
just through experience, and that's not happening and hasn't been happening for a little while. So they end up in a situation where you could lose Hamilton, Verstappen, Ocon, Colapinto, Alonso. That's a lot of drivers to replace. And I genuinely don't know enough about Formula 2 to say who should be going into them. But the next 2 to 3 years of F1 is going to be really interesting from the driver's side, I think.
I've lined up a guest host for a F2 and F3 episode.
Oh, I'm excited for this. Do we get to quiz them?
Yeah, she can lead the seminar and teach us, because I know absolute naff all about F2 and F3.
I know a little bit more about F3 because I've been following Freddie Slater and Ugo Chuko's careers, because they're both really, really impressive from their Formula Regional and Formula 4 days. But F2 is a little bit of a kind of black box for me. I don't know enough about what's going on there. So yeah, looking forward to a Formula 2 one then, actually. That'd be really good.
Yeah, F2 thickos. So unless you have any other notes on Australia, we'll sort of leave this F1 for thickos follow up there. Do you have any parting words, Dave?
I'm just back to being optimistic about the future of the sport, both from a technical racing side and a driver's side. That was a really optimistic race. I think I'm partially feeling that because I was a little bit worried come Saturday that things weren't going to be going great. But no, great opening to 2026. Well worth getting up at 3:30 in the morning to watch. I
Absolutely.
enjoyed that.
So if you enjoyed this episode, consider giving it a little rating, but also checking out, on my behalf, issue 3 of SLICKS magazine is out in April, and the front cover is about to be released. As you're listening / watching this, the front cover will be released tomorrow. And on Dave's behalf, Dave, how can we find out when the Chinese Grand Prix is running?
You could use the Racing Line app, which
There we
gives you
go.
timetables for, it's actually 217 series now, because I added a couple at the weekend there. And 17 series all converted to your local time zone. And you can set notifications before events and things like that. And for events which are streamed on YouTube, which a lot of motorsport is, you can actually watch live in the app. So don't just use it for F1, use it to discover more series as well. And when the F1's not on or between sessions, there's even more racing in there for you to watch.
There you go. My dad asked me the other day if you have lawnmower racing on there.
Oh, I should do that. There was an R Factor mod way back in the day for that in like 2006. Somebody made a lawnmower racing mod. I should see if I could put lawnmowers in.
There you go. Get a racing line lawnmower athlete.
Oh, I love that. In a proper like gardening dungarees and stuff, and a straw hat.
Sponsored by B&Q or something, yeah. But we'll leave that episode there. Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed. What's the next one we're doing? Next episode, we're doing WRC for thickos in preparation for Safari Rally Kenya, which is
We're going to have
round
to flip
3.
it round. I'm going to have to ask you questions now, because I looked at WRC and it turns out I knew even less than I thought I did, and I already knew that I didn't know much. So I'm going to be asking the stupid questions this time.
That's what we're here for. So next one is WRC for thickos in preparation for round 3 of the 2026 season in Kenya. So look forward to that. Dave, thank you very much. And we'll catch
Thank you for having me.
on the next one.
Slack.